Hello, my name is Jay Smith, and my presentation is on NGOs' effect of the future of Pakistan. I chose this because I'm very interested in NGOs, and I would like to work with them in the future, as well as I believe that NGOs have a powerful and will have an even more powerful effect on the future and success of Pakistan. So, what is an NGO? NGO is a non-governmental organization. The World Bank defines NGOs as a private organization that pursues activities to relieve suffering, promote the interests of the poor, protect the environment, provide basic social services, or undertake community development. The difference between a nonprofit organization and NGO typically is pretty much that an NGO is international and works outside of the US, and a nonprofit is more of an inside organization. So, history of NGOs in Pakistan. They've been there from the beginning, but in the 1970s, the government more promoted a philosophy of social work and welfare. And then in the 80s, they started doing a lot more funding and grants, which drew a lot more NGOs in the 90s. But then in the 2000s, the focus of NGOs shifted to more of an advocacy and development aspect rather than a humanitarian and poverty focus. So, NGOs in Pakistan. There are lots of NGOs in Pakistan. The United Nations Development Program estimates the number between 8 and 16,000. If you include unregistered NGOs and community-based organizations, the number is looking between more like 25,000 and 35,000, and by some estimates as high as 45,000. The Canadian International Development Agency states that there are less than 100 effective NGOs in Pakistan. So there are thousands of weaker organizations or community-based organizations, but less than 100 actually successful, powerful running NGOs. Pakistan's current situation, we know that it struggles a lot with corruption, with education, specifically with girls, women inequality, have a lot of problems with religious extremism, as well as a lot of poverty. So, what can the future hold with NGOs in Pakistan? Well, NGOs in Pakistan have always held an important role and have an important role right now in the present. And they will continue to do so even more with how everything is going and the current situation of Pakistan. They will play an important role with women inequality, education, corruption, and human rights, as well as other areas that they would solve problems by focusing on those small areas. But what needs to happen? So the overall government situation with the NGOs is positive support. They do offer tax exemptions, and they do offer financial support and grants. What are the problems with all of these? Well, yes, they do help, but there are also lots of difficulties that arrive from that. The registration process is extremely difficult and very challenging for an NGO. Not impossible, but the time process associated with working with the various different branches of the government in registering and continuing the registration process is very difficult and very time consuming. There are restrictions to specific areas, as well as the problem with the corruption within the government has a lot of problems associated with that as well. The outside funded based NGOs also tend to have different problems depending on what they are working with because of the general distrust or problems that the government potentially sees in those organizations. There were 18 NGOs recently that were forced to leave Pakistan without explanation, simply due to their funding was based outside of Pakistan. So, where will NGOs go from here? that really depends a lot on what happens now and what will happen in the future. NGOs have a powerful potential, but there are a lot of things that need to happen first. They would be able to solve a lot of things through education, poverty, as well as the religious problems that the country is having, women's rights, economics, human rights. There are so many things that it can go through. But what needs to be done? The registration needs to be easier. It needs to be easier for the NGOs to work with the government. And the corruption in the NGOs as well as the government associated with the NGOs needs to change and needs to be fixed. If Pakistan is able to get all of these things working, then the Pakistan government will be able to progress and the Pakistan people would have so many more opportunities out there. This is my presentation, and thank you all for watching.